under one book, you'll get to read all of them. But I hope you enjoy it. It's really something different and something new for me. And I had a ton of fun writing the story. Okay, guys, it's time for me to introduce that guest star I told you about. It's Rebecca Rowan-Horst, the author of Race to the Sun. Yay!
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Rick. I'm happy to be here.
Yay, awesome. Well, very good. So how are things in New Mexico?
Things are pretty good. We're hanging in there. It's, sort of a day-to-day thing, but my family's good and I'm good, so can't complain.
Very good, very good. So I have to ask first of all, was your daughter pleased? Because I know that your daughter's a fan of my stuff. I know she has great taste. Was she pleased with how Race to the Sun came out?
Yeah, I think so. Her class read it as like a sort of like the class book. And so she got to sort of be the star and tell everybody all the inside, scoops, like where I got my ideas and how she helped out. She was a little disappointed that the character Maya, that's named after her, didn't play a larger role. But besides that, I think she was happy.
Excellent. She was a big help then, huh?
Yeah, she was definitely a big help. Yeah. She's great. Like, she has so many good ideas. She has the kid eye, so she's able to like really tell me what's working and what's not working. So definitely appreciate that. So as you said, my daughter is a big fan of yours. So I wrote the Race to the Sun really because she wanted me to. Have your sons influenced your writing?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they are older now. It makes me old just to think about it. They're 25 and 21. Yikes! But I know it happens so quickly. But they have been like my frontline readers for a long time. When they were little, I used to read them the manuscripts, and they would tell me right away if like something I thought was funny was not so funny. And
Right.
they would tell me, like Maya does, like if I got it right or if I was in the ballpark, they would let me know. And they still do that. I have to say they don't read my stuff quite as often, but if I need some advice, they're great editors, and boy, are they brutally honest. Is your family brutally honest with you, or do you like, yeah,
Oh
that's all
yeah,
great?
yeah. My daughter knows. She does not hold back. She'll be like, "Oh, that's great." She's got that sarcasm down, and
Yeah.
she wields it. Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to believe that. I mean, I'm looking back to January, and it's been a year. I think we can all agree it's been quite a year. But looking back to the publication of Race to the Sun, what was that like? What was the experience like of publishing that book
Mm.
and talking to kids about it?
You know, I have to admit, I was a little nervous to go on tour. I went on tour with the book, and I had to go, talk to lots of middle schools. But it turned out to be the most rewarding, most wonderful experience I think I've had in publishing. I particularly, I think, was really moved by going to a lot of the tribal schools. I went to the Native American Community Academy in Albuquerque, which the school Ix in Race to the Sun is inspired by. And I talked to all the Native kids there. I went out to the tribal school in Acoma Pueblo. I went to a lot of schools with big Native populations in southern Arizona. And it was just amazing. So rewarding, so I don't know, just inspiring to like see these kids and see, they'd come in, they were a little like, I don't know, they're making me go to this assembly kind of thing. You're
Right.
not Rick, that sort of thing. But by the time I got through my presentation and they heard a little more, I would read them like the first chapter of the book. They were in, they were excited. They couldn't believe that like there was native characters in the book that were just like them, that were not like in the 1800s or, not sort of the
Right.
stereotypes we get so much, that, they were having adventures and, they were fighting monsters and all this sort of stuff. So, we took lots of pictures together and their eyes would just light up and they would come back, afterwards and talk to me. And it was just great. Like, I'm so grateful for that experience.
Oh, that's just so awesome to hear.
Yeah. So here's a question for you.
Okay.
Lester visits a lot of different locations over the course of the Trials of Apollo series. Were any of those places meaningful to you in your real life?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I tend to sort of write novels like road trips. You know, they always, there's always a lot of traveling involved, and we visit a lot of places. Um, so yeah, I mean, all of these places are places that I've either been or that my kids and I have gone, like on family vacations. In the early days with the Lightning Thief, I wanted to be sure that my sons could like picture where these things were happening. So I would say, okay, and now they're having an adventure in Denver, and my kids, oh, hey, we've been there, and I know, coincidence, right? And St. Louis and New York. So yeah, with the Trials of Apollo, it's the same thing. I mean. I have family in Santa Barbara, so there was a scene set there. And some of the scenes are places we've seen before, like New York, obviously, and the San Francisco Bay Area. I taught there for a lot of years, so it's always nice to be able to go back and set a book there. Indianapolis, I had never been, but I had to go to one of the big warehouses and sign copies of books out there. So it's actually a really cool city. I had never been there before, but I had to give them a shout out and do that. So yeah, I mean, locations are pretty important to me. And I notice, like in your book also, I mean, there are really some important and distinct places in there. And could you talk a little bit about those and how you chose them?
Oh gosh, I think just like you, these are places that I knew, places that really inspire me. I started the story in Albuquerque, where I lived for a couple of years, and I'm really familiar with the town. I live about an hour north of there now. And then, of course, when they go to the Navajo Nation, one of the places they go is Canyon de Chelly, which is this beautiful picture behind me. And that is where they meet Spider-Woman, and they go to Spider Rock. And it's about, gosh, I don't know, probably an hour from where my in-laws live on the Nation. And I just really wanted to highlight it. It's a beautiful place. I think a lot of people are familiar with the Grand Canyon, but they're not familiar with Canyon de Chelly. And it's just an amazing, gorgeous, like sacred place to the Navajo.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah. So as someone who writes about monster hunters, I love the different monsters in your series. If you could be any of them, which monsters would you pick?
I kind of like there's a sort of a, I don't know if they're monsters, but they're sort of a humanoid breed called the Pandoi, or the one is singular Pandos. And I really love them. I hadn't heard about them, but they're described in some of the ancient Greek writings. And they have these enormous, like Dumbo-like ears. They're just enormous, and they can fly with them. And they are supposedly like also great warriors. But I just love the idea of these humanoid characters that have ears that are so big they can kind of wrap themselves in them like cloaks, and they can sort of glide through the air. And I figured they'd also be great musicians because, with ears like that, they could hear everything. So I gave them all like names like pitch and tenor, named after a musical thing. So that I think I'd like to glide around on my ears. I think that'd be fun.
That sounds pretty awesome. I don't know about having ears you can wrap your whole body in.
I mean, yeah, I guess there would be, some things that were not so great about having ears that size. Your Q-tip bill would probably be really bad.
Exactly.
So Nijane faces certain challenges, I think it's fair to say, in Race to the Sun. Have you ever, even if you're not a monster hunter, have you ever faced a challenge that the heroes would have to face, like something that you just thought was completely insurmountable, but you overcame it?
Oh gosh, I think my whole writing career has been a challenge that I've had to overcome. I came to it kind of late. I think I'm probably a little older than some of the other authors on the Rick Riordan Presents imprint. I'd had two whole careers before I became a writer. And I think it's because I didn't know I could be a writer. I didn't know that, people like me were allowed to write science fiction and fantasy. And so I think that's an obstacle I overcome every day, and sort of the challenges that come with being a writer, with getting up and being inspired every day, with continuing to work in the face of really difficult odds, because it is hard, to succeed and to stay inspired. And so I think that's probably my biggest challenge, is to just keep in this business every day. But, when I see my daughter and I see these kids that I got to visit, I think it makes it all worth it. That's sort of like my sustenance to keep going.
Well, that's a pretty good reason to keep going.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you found this, but for me, I mean, like even after 30 books, it never gets easy. You may get more used to it, but it's still that same challenge with every book.
I know. I sat down to write my next book, and I was like staring at a blank piece of I was staring at Microsoft Word, and I was trying to be like, how do I write a book? I couldn't remember what the first thing I did to write a book was.
Right.
And then I remembered I don't actually start in Microsoft Word. I use some writing software to outline. And I was like, well, so now I need to close Microsoft Word and actually open the app that I write in. But I'd forgotten, I had literally forgotten. So yeah, every day.
I feel that.
Yeah. Okay, I have a little list of questions. That's why I keep looking over there.
Okay, no, cool.
So, was it your goal to bring closure to all the characters from the Prophecy of Seven by the end of this book?
It was, yeah. I mean, I think it's a really big challenge to write 15 books about Percy's world. So many characters by the end of that. And I mean, you're a great world builder. You know all about that. You know how it can get unwieldy really, really fast. And you have all these elements and you keep having to balance them and remember who's connected with who and how. So I was hoping to at least give the readers one more farewell cameo from everybody. So even though they might not know, the whole story, they get a sense, of what each of them is up to and kind of where they seem to be going with their lives. And I tried to leave them all in a fairly good place. So hopefully, after the Tower of Nero, I hope everybody feels like they know what's happening and the seven demigods have sort of sailed off into the sunset to great, great lives after that.
Wow. So I have to ask you, as a fellow world builder, do you keep a world building Bible, or do you a binder with all this information, or are you able to hold it all in your head?
I wish I had started making a Bible with everything in it. I didn't. I was so bad. So what I do is I just try to hold everything in my head, but then I go back into the books a lot. If I get stuck, I say, okay, what was that guy's name again? Where's that person from? So I have to go back and do that a lot. And honestly, I'll say that the fan wikis that they do online are sometimes very helpful. Sometimes not, but occasionally I will go to the wikis and they'll say, well, that's what they have. Let me go check and see if that's accurate or not. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I bet.
And speaking of world building, I have to give a shout out to your other work. You are so phenomenally talented and so multi-talented in the things that you write. Could you tell us a little bit about your latest project?
Oh, I would love to. So I have a new book coming out in just a few days. It's called Black Sun, and it's a big epic fantasy. It's an adult epic fantasy, and I happen to have a copy right here.
Nice. That's beautiful.
And that cover art is by the two-time Hugo Award-winning illustrator John Picasso. So shout out to him for that gorgeous cover. And it is a big epic fantasy set in a secondary world inspired by the pre-Columbia Americas. But it's not a history book, it's a big fantasy, so there are giant corvids and siren mermaids and blood magic and vengeful gods, because what's a story without a vengeful god, right?
You bet.
So yeah, I'm excited for that one. I can't wait for people to read it.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait either.
So let me ask you this. What do you think was the biggest lesson Apollo learned by the end?
Well, I hope he learned a lesson. With those gods, you never know. But I think it really was that being human is really hard. I don't think Apollo really appreciated that. He was born an immortal. He has been around for millennia, but he's never really had to work at anything very much. I mean, everything came easily to him. I mean, he's gorgeous and he's multi-talented and he's all powerful and he just snaps his fingers and anything he wants happens. So to be sent down to earth as a sort of a hopeless 16-year-old kid who's tripping over his own feet, that was quite a come down for him.
Like
Um,
that.
I hope that by the end of the Trials of Apollo, he has made a little progress in learning some humility, and maybe also learning that being human isn't really all bad. It's not always a punishment. You know, there are things about being human that are pretty great, like depending on each other and finding friends and finding the sort of the found family that really supports you and recognizes for you for who you are. So
Yeah, I'm a
anyway.
huge fan of the found family. I do that a lot in my books too. So that is very cool. Have you read Madeline Miller's work, like Circe and the Song of Achilles?
Yes, Madeline Miller's amazing. Yeah, Song of
Oh,
Achilles was just so eye-opening to me. I mean, the take that she does on it is just gorgeous. I love her take on Achilles and Patroclus, and
yeah.
Circe. Yeah, and she's such an incredible writer.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. I'm so late to the game. I just read Circe like last week, and I'm just in awe. But I love, sort of the way that she portrayed the gods
Mm.
and the humans and sort of how that all works. And I was not as familiar with Greek mythology as a lot of folks, but particularly now, that I read your books. But that was cool. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, I just
totally.
wanted to ask if you'd read it because I thought you'd really appreciate those.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you've recommended a lot of books to me that have been absolutely fantastic. The Irish series, Tana French, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so good. I read that
Dublin
on your
Murder
recommendation.
Squad.
Oh my gosh, those are wonderful too.
Oh, I'm so
So,
glad you like those. Oh,
oh,
yeah.
totally. Well, it's
Yeah.
always so great to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
No, well, thank you for having me. But before I leave, Rick, I must issue a challenge to you.
I was afraid of that.
So I want you to look in the mirror and tell us what you see, just the way that Dejeuner had to go through a trial where she looked in the mirror and saw a truth about herself. So what is it
Ooh,
that you see when you look in the mirror?
okay, that's scaring me a little bit because that was pretty intense for her. Um, okay, I'll give it a shot. Challenge accepted. Thanks
Excellent.
again. I got to admit, I'm a little scared about this challenge. Rebecca Rowanhorse has asked me to look in the mirror like Nijonet does in Race to the Sun and learn something about myself. Kind of frightened what I might learn, but here goes nothing. Oh, wait, I'm starting to see something. Rick, Rick, I bring a message from your future. There comes a time in everyone's life when they discover their true destiny as a demigod or a monster hunter. You are none of those. Stick to writing books, books, books.
Why did that guy get such easy trials? Is he favored by Zeus or something? Okay,
Hey, that was awesome. And so now we have some audience questions. Um, we know that we've sent in some great questions. Rick, are you ready for some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what they got.
All right. So first one up, which of any, if any of your characters do you believe is underrated by the fans?
Underrated. Well, they all have their own sort of fan club base. I think a lot of the characters do. I'm not. I don't know if I guess I maybe would say Carter and Sadie Kane just because they kind of have their own trilogy. And because it's not directly connected to Percy Jackson's world, some of the Percy fans might not be as familiar with them. And they have passionate and ardent fans, the Kane Chronicles do. But I guess that's one that I'm really excited about that some readers might not be familiar with.
So I have a question here from Topher Bradford, who is from the Camp Half-Blood Austin branch.
Yes, of course.
And they collectively have come up with the question that they've noticed that nearly all of the Rick Riordan Presents authors use Skittles or Cheetos woven into their stories, and they love it. They sense there might be something delicious and or mischievous happening there. What's the story?
I didn't actually have anything to do with that, but I think what happened is in the first couple of books in the Aru Shah series and then in the Storm Runner, these were sort of motifs that the authors used. And now that we have so many authors, they're kind of doing like little callbacks to each other, and they're putting Easter eggs from each other's series in each other's books. I think it's delightful. I haven't, I didn't ask them to do that. That was totally all on their own, but I think it's great.
So Jasmine H asks, she's got two questions here. Which characters from any books would listen to BTS? And which anime Japanese songs does Alex Fierro listen to?
Well, I don't know. Honestly, don't know. I guess you know the characters and you know BTS probably better than I do. So I think I wouldn't probably be the expert on matching the characters to the music type, but I guess I bet you guys could. So I will leave that to your imagination. And in terms of anime, um, Alex's love of anime is based on my own son's love on anime. They love everything. Well, no, that's not true. There are some things that they say they're too popular, and they don't like the popular stuff. They're like real connoisseurs of like real anime, whatever they think that is. So I don't know. I imagine she would just kind of have like genuine theme songs, going through her head. I'm a personal fan of the one from Beastars. I think that's a great theme song. So I can see that kind of playing on her playlist.
Sonia Teng, who is going to be 8 on the 15th, said, why did you decide to banish Apollo and not any other Greek gods from Olympus?
Yeah, great question. And happy early birthday. Well, Apollo I picked because there was a precedent for it. That actually happened in Greek mythology twice before. Zeus grounded him and turned him into a mortal. And when I read those stories, which I hadn't been familiar with, I said, wow, first of all, I didn't know Zeus could do that. He can just like strip away your godhood and make you a person and send you down to earth. But once I figured that out, I said, well, why not? Let's do it one more time and give him a third strike and see what happens.
So Ishan, who is celebrating his birthday today, so happy birthday, Ishan, he asks, why are the Apollo chapter names formatted as haikus?
Well, happy birthday, Sean. They're haikus because in the original Percy Jackson series, Apollo did a famously horrible haiku. And I just found it funny that the god of poetry would be absolute rubbish at writing haiku. So it was kind of a callback to the Percy Jackson series that each of the chapters would start with one of his haiku. I now feel like I'm an expert at Apollonian haiku. Not that that's worth very much, but I had to write like 200 of them.
Erin Rooney says, if you had to go on a quest and you had to pick two companions from your stories, who would they be and why?
That's tough. That's tough. They all have definite skills of their own. Gosh, I don't know. I would have to pick Annabeth because she is the brilliant thinker and strategist. So it would have to be her. And then, I mean, Percy obviously is like the no-brainer choice. I mean, he'd be a good one. But Grover also would be great to have around. I think Grover too, if he was on the quest, I wouldn't feel so bad about being like so cowardly because Grover and I could both hide behind the bushes when the monsters came, so I'd feel a little better.
So Kelly Chen asks, what has been your best and or worst experience so far being a well-known author?
Oh goodness. Well, I mean, it's been quite a journey, and I think the best experience is I'm not sure I can just pick one. I guess it's hearing back from former students or readers who have been with me for a long time. And every time that they say either the books helped them get through a really hard time, that means a lot to me. Or when they say the books inspired them for their future, either to become teachers or writers or classicists or archaeologists, or I've heard, all kinds of different career paths that have been inspired by the books. And that's wonderful. And hard things, I don't know. I mean, I wish I could say that like we were talking about earlier with Rebecca, I wish I could say that books got easier to write, but they don't. Every single book is just as hard as the last one. So that's not necessarily a bad experience, but it is something that I find is a challenge over and over again.
Following that, actually, from Marina Sandoval, she says, your books have been a huge inspiration for me growing up. They've inspired me to be true to myself and to keep believing. And my question is, who or what was your inspiration behind Leo Valdez? He was my favorite character, since he was one of the first Mexican characters I'd ever seen in a main role in a series I loved.
Awesome. I'm glad Leo worked for you. And I mean, Leo is one of the characters I think I feel closest to. I grew up in South Texas. So, I mean, I know Leo very well. I mean, I went to school with Leo. I went to college with Leo. Leo was a friend of mine. And I'm not just thinking like of one person, but he was certainly modeled after, the Mexican American culture in South Texas that I'm very, very familiar with, and it's been part of my life forever. So it would be difficult for me to imagine my life without people like Leo Valdez, at my side. So he's a great guy. I like him.
So Nathan, age 10, asks, what's your favorite myth or legend that you've written about so far?
Very difficult question. I mean, I've written about so many of them. I guess I'd have to say the Norse mythology legends are my favorite in general, and I think in particular, I really liked writing the scene with the clay giant that is built and made sort of as a duel between Magnus and Alex and a giant and the clay figure. It's a very strange myth to me, and I like the way that I was able to bring it into the modern times. That was fun.
Gillian Marquez says, I was wondering if you were planning on having any standalone books about any of the characters. Nico has always been one of my favorite characters, and I'd really love to see more from his point of view.
Yes. I mean, I think at some point that's going to happen. I don't want to give anything away for those of you who haven't gotten your book yet. You're still waiting to read The Tower of Nero, so I don't want to spoil anything. But as you read The Tower of Nero, I hope you'll see that it wraps things up in terms of the large story. Like I was saying, I'm not going to do any more big 5-book series. However, there's a lot of room for standalones. The one with Nico, that's certainly one I could do. I think it'd be great to do a Hunters of Artemis book. That's certainly on the table as something I could do. And I'm sure I'll do other books that are not related to Percy's World, but are also standalones. And writing one novel at a time, right now I think that's where my head is at. That'll help me to sort of pivot from one idea to another more easily.
Gabrielle asks, how early in your writing process do you begin to plan to introduce magical objects into the story? Do you have any rejected magical objects you initially considered adding and then decided not to?
Huh. I don't think I've ever gotten that question before, Gabrielle. That's a great question. The magic objects, I guess some of them come straight out of the mythology. So that is pretty early in the process. Like, I know that there's going to be a pair of winged shoes. Okay. I'm not maybe sure where to put them, but I know that they're going to be there. So I'd say it happens pretty early in that case. Sometimes I'll just realize that, oh, this demigod needs a weapon. What have I not used yet that would be exciting and interesting? I'm not sure that I've rejected any. In the early days, we talked about firearms and how we weren't going to have that be a thing in the world. I mean, it wasn't something we were going to talk a lot about. We were going to sort of keep it more traditional in the sense of the weapons that the demigods would have used in classical times. So that's the only thing I can think about.
Anaya asks, the children of Aphrodite don't really seem to have any powers. Every once in a while they can charm speak. And they're just children of goddesses. And I think that's pretty unfair. Children of Hephaestus makes great blacksmiths. Children of Hermes have multiple skills. Children of Hecate make great magicians. But Aphrodite's children don't really do anything other than look pretty. So her question is, do they have any other power which was not mentioned in the books?
That's a fair point, and I think that's well mentioned. The Aphrodite people, they're sort of like, actually, this is a strange comparison, but I think in some ways they're more like the children of Athena, in that they don't have the big flashy powers, like where they're, summoning fireballs and stuff. Their powers are more cerebral. Their powers are more about charisma and character. I think that the Aphrodite children would be your social influencers, for instance. They would have enormous power, but it would be through sort of affecting the mood and the sort of the state of mind of other people. They could be incredibly powerful. They would make fantastic leaders, fantastic public figures of any kind, because you would have this sort of presence that would draw people to you. And even though that doesn't seem like a superpower, I don't know. I think that's a pretty formidable set of weapons there if you're a child of Aphrodite.
So Kristen asks, having such a diverse audience of readers, how do you balance the disparity between readers who have grown with your characters and are now adults compared to the newer, younger readers? Has knowing that you have readers who began reading the series in 2005 and stuck with it for 15 years and who are now adults changed the way you write the books?
It's a great question, and it's very true. I am aware of all the wonderful fans that started reading me when they were kids and now have grown up with the books and are in a different place in their lives. I always say that if you still enjoy the books, then you're still the right age for them. But having said that, no, it doesn't change the way that I write. I in my mind, I have very firmly sort of the midpoint of middle grade as my focus. That's just because that's who I am. I'm a middle school teacher. That's the audience, the age group I know the best. And if I tried to skew the books older, I tell you this from experience, it doesn't work very well for me anyway. That's not where my baseline is. So I just keep writing the books that I keep writing. I don't try to age them up. That's just kind of, I like to stay in the range where I know that, for one thing, I'm making a lot of difference, I hope, because middle school is such a hard time. It's so critical that it's important to write books for them. And also I have to say it's a great honor to hear that like the adult readers would like to read adult books from me. It reminds me very much of my students. They would come to me always at the end of the year at 6th grade. And I was very fortunate. They loved my class. I was so, close to the students and I loved them too. And it was awesome. And they would say, Mr. Riordan, they would come back maybe 2 years later and say, Mr. Riordan, why don't you come to high school now and teach high school? You should be our teacher in high school. And I said, but guys, what about the other generations of middle schoolers that are coming up? They don't count. So, I had to say, no, I really need to stay here and work with these guys. But thank you for wanting to bring me with you.
Eleanor asks, did you ever consider making the TV show in animation rather than live action?
Well, animation is something that we've talked about and something that we might revisit later. Yes, we discussed animation. I did not want the reboot to be animated. I love animation, don't get me wrong, but animation, just like live action, is really easy to get wrong. So if it was a bad animation, that would be really tricky. And there are just as many questions about how to adapt animated as there are live action. The other thing is, frankly, I think the live action tends to get a lot more coverage. It tends to get a much bigger audience. It tends to have a bigger oomph in terms of how many people are attracted to it. And so I thought that was important that we try to do the live action correctly this time. And then after that, I would be totally open to talking about animated projects.
From Samira, age 15, who says she's the girl you put on your Instagram last year. You have done an amazing job at having all sorts of characters in your books, including Muslims and a lot of LGBTQ+. Will you ever include a Christian character in your Percy Jackson Riordan verse books?
Oh, I think I'm sure are Christian characters. I'm not sure that they make a point of talking about it too much, but I'm sure that there are. I think the implication when Percy is talking in the underworld about, how does this underworld fit with the whole heaven-hell thing? I think the implication there is that Percy's background is he's probably been raised in some Christian sort of quasi, like a lot of people in the United States. He's Christian, even though he may not be sort of practicing, but that's kind of his background. That's my read on him anyway. I can't, I'm not going to say, I can't point to anything and say that, but yeah, it's a great question.
From Sufi, I loved reading the Demigod series. Do you have any upcoming side stories, such as the Percy Jackson Kane Chronicles crossovers or Percy Jackson Gods? And I think I speak on behalf of a lot of fans. What happened in Albania?
Well, no side stories in Percy's world on the docket right now. I'm not saying that won't happen, but that's not something I'm working on now. And having wrapped up this 15-book arc, I'm just right now sort of taking a break from it. And probably if I go back to it, the next thing will be a standalone. And in terms of Albania, honestly, I don't know. They didn't tell me either. They just won't tell me. I asked them too. They said, nope, sorry, Riordan. What happens in Albania stays in Albania. We're not talking about it.
If you could choose one or two musicians from any era to compose or record a concept album about characters from the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, who would you choose?
Wow. Oh, that's really difficult. I love music. I love music from every era and every genre. Um, Concept album. Wow. I don't know. I'd love to see what like Thelonious Monk could do. I think he would. He's an incredible jazz musician who just, you know, just did amazing things and expanded the genre of jazz. He would be awesome. I'm a Beatles fan, so I'd love to see like what Paul McCartney would do. I don't know that those two things would go together necessarily, but those are the two that come to mind right off the top.
Ariana writes, we've heard about the Netflix series based on the Kane Chronicles. Do you want to see Magnus Chase series adapted into movies?
I would love to do that. I think we have to start with Percy, though. It's tricky because, well, I'll tell you, the Kane Chronicles at Netflix and the Disney Plus Percy series, it was very difficult to sort of separate them and say, okay, this is Kane and this is Percy. And we did it that way because the Netflix team that we were talking to really had a great idea, and it just seemed like the right place to send it. And the Disney Plus team, you know, they have the rights to Percy, and we found a great team to do that. Magnus is a little more closely tied to Percy. It would be possible maybe to tease those things out, but I think it makes more sense to see how the Disney Plus Percy Jackson project goes. And then if that does well, then maybe we can convince Disney to do a Magnus series. And I would love that too.
Following from this, Ruth asks, how long is the Percy and the Olympians TV show going to be?
That's impossible to know. I mean, it like any TV show, it depends on viewership and how everybody likes it. Now, we were starting with The Lightning Thief as the first season. And I mentioned earlier that my idea is a book a season. Now, that doesn't mean I can promise you that it'll go 5 seasons. That very much depends on the studio. But if it, you know, that's my hope. If it goes well, that would be super. And then, of course, as you know, there's all these other stories as well. The Heroes of Olympus and the Trials of Apollo. That's so far into the future. You're talking 15 years from now. You know, if we were to get through all those series, I don't even know what that would look like. That would be amazing, but I can't promise you that now. We'll just have to see how things go with the first one.
So Dylan asks, how long does it take you to write one of your books?
It typically takes me somewhere between 6 months and a year. It depends on what else is going on. If I'm juggling 2 books a year, which I sometimes do, but the absolute fastest that I seem to be able to produce a book if I'm doing nothing else is 6 months. That's like 2 months of planning and outlining, maybe 2 months of the first draft, just writing it all down in one fell swoop and not stopping. And then however much time I have left, revising over and over and over again.
And then I think this is going to be our final question, and it's
All
a
right.
nice one to end on. Vanita asks, do you have any advice for a kid who wants to write books when they grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. The simplest way I can say it is there are 3 things. The 3 big things are, number 1, read a lot. That's where you're going to figure out what stories look like that you enjoy. The second thing is write a lot. If you're not writing, you're not getting better. So even though you may think what you're writing is no good, believe me, I still think that all the time. Write it anyway. Finish what you start. Get those stories out. And when you go back, I think you'll find that they're not as bad as you thought they were. So that's the second thing. The third thing is don't give up. Most writers that aren't published, it's not because they weren't good, it's because they gave up. So stick with it. I have tons of rejection notes myself. It'll happen when it's time for it to happen for you, but it'll only happen if you keep trying.
Thank you so much, Rick. That was just such a pleasure. A
Thanks,
wonderful
Angela.
presentation. It was a great conversation with Rebecca. Fabulous questions. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us. Remember, you can pick up all of Rick's books and all of Rebecca's books at keplers.com. Tonight's event was produced by Kepler's Literary Foundation. If you're in a position to contribute to keep us producing events like this, please consider a donation. There's a donate button at keplers.org. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly, there's a contact button there too. Stay in touch with us. Check out our upcoming events under the heading Refresh the Page. I really want you to know that next up, for all Artemis Fowl readers out there, we're hosting Owen Colfer with Jonathan Stroud, two such amazing writers, on October 25th with Owen's new book, Deny All Charges, which is going to be just so much fun. Please join us again. Stay well, be happy, and have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.